hearing a guy read about it, but like we literally have access to it. Raise your hand if you have more than one Bible. Raise your hand if you got, well, yeah, everybody has unlimited versions there. Raise your hand if you got at least 3 hard copies of the Bible. 5 or more. Right. Who thinks they have the most Bibles? Everybody's scared? What? That's going to raise your expectation. That's going to raise your expectation now. You tell me you got 10 Bibles. You got 6? I hope it's good. Do you have different translations? Yes. That's good. A question was brought to our attention earlier in the week, and I know I've said it before, we talk about it a lot, but there are different translations of the Bible. You got the King James, the New American Standard Version, the ESV, which is the English Standard Version, which is what we preach from, the NIV, the Message, and all these things. And a lot of times people ask, why are there these different versions of the Bible? Isn't it the same Bible? And I just want to break it down for a moment and just explain that the Bible wasn't written in English. In the Middle East and Israel, they don't speak English as their primary language. And so the Old Testament was written in what language? Anybody know? Hebrew. And the New Testament was written in? Greek. Okay. So, languages don't always translate perfectly into other languages. And all of my, anybody's bilingual in here? Bilingual? Yeah. So y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. I give the example each and every time. If I was to tell y'all in Spanish that I'm 31 years old, I would say, yo tengo 31 años. Literally, if I translated that word for word into English, it would say, I have 31 years. Now, who in conversation is ever going to be like, hey man, how old are you? I have 31 years. That would be kind of odd. And so, when there's these groups of translators, and these are godly men that have gone to have doctorates and studied Hebrew and Greek for decades, and they know God's Word way better than any of us, they sit down in a group of 50 of them, and they start reading these older texts. They go back as far as they can. And when they read it, they understand that there's going to be times when they read Hebrew, and it just wouldn't make sense in English. I have 31 years. So they have a decision to make. We can either keep it as true to the original text as possible and just put, I have 31 years, and just put the heck out of here. And some versions of the Bible do that. There's a whole graph and a dynamic of Bibles that try to stick word for word to the original text. Those are some like the NASB. The New American Standard Version is the one that's touted as the closest to the original Hebrew. Some groups will say, I think that we can still convey the same message without confusing people. So why don't we say, I am 31 years old? That's going to be something that's in the middle of that sort of chart, like the New International Version. A lot of us use the NIV or something like that would say, I am 31 years old. And then some groups of these people say, you know what, let's just make it relatable. Let's make it readable. How would you say that in regular conversation? I'm 31. That's going to be the NLT or the Message, something along those lines. So if we come together and we read, and the wording's slightly different, your Bible's not messed up, it was just a group of people that helped compose yours decided that, you know what, I think it's more important to make it relatable. I think it's more important for them to get anything. Because, yeah, we can be true to text word for word, but if it doesn't make sense to them, then it doesn't matter at all. So I always recommend a couple of different versions. You always want to try to have one that's word for word that you can refer to. And when you get caught up, maybe go to the NLT, maybe go to the Message to get big picture kind of understanding, and then go back to the NASB or something along that. So you want to use these cross references, and praise be to God for things like YouVersion and stuff, because you literally have, every version. There's a version on YouVersion called Hawaiian Pidgin, and I promise you, it's like ghetto island. It'd be hard for you to even read, but like, there's no excuse, no matter what type of slang, dialect you speak, there is something that you can relate to on the YouVersion. So we're super thankful for that. And so we've been talking about Israel progressing. They've been released from Egypt. They were governed by this loose government system known as judges, where these people would lead smaller groups of people, 1,000, and now they've gone on to the monarchy. And I just wanted to show you real quick sort of a breakdown. It always is helpful to know what type of literature I am reading. And so the Old Testament is really primarily, and this is real blurry, I didn't realize that, But there's three types of literature in the Old Testament: historical, poetical, or wisdom, and prophetical. And so we're going to be reading about the monarchy, which is in 1st and 2nd Samuel, which is historical. Now, inside of this historical text, can you find some wisdom literature? Can you find some poetry? Yeah, and we've been reading over the past couple weeks. David was a rock star. You know, he wrote songs, and you'll hear songs in different... Moses had a song of praise when they won victories and stuff like that. You'll find that in there, but primarily, that first set of books from Genesis to Esther are going to be historical books. Then you got Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. They're written like poetry or wisdom. And then all the way from Isaiah all the way down to Malachi or Malachi. That's all prophecy. Some of it was fulfilled in the times of the Scripture. Some of them are still yet to be fulfilled. And some of them were fulfilled during the time of Scripture and are going to be fulfilled again. So that's where we're at. This is a really neat graphic to help you kind of visualize the sort of different divisions of Scripture. All right, so you got Genesis through Deuteronomy, the first 5 books. Those are the books of Moses, or the books of the law, or the Torah, or the Pentateuch. And then the rest of these, from Joshua to Esther, are really sort of that, we have from creation, and then the enslavement of his people, and then the law is given. And then we have thousands of years of history, and that's where we're going to be tonight. So we're going to be in the book of 2nd Samuel. Oh, yeah. Amen. Mama golfer? Yeah. Y'all turn to 2nd Samuel. 2nd Samuel. So we've gone from the monarchy. Does anybody remember the name of the last judge before we went to the monarchy? There was a man who was in charge. He was a prophet. He was also a judge. And they requested to have a king under his leadership. Anybody remember who that was? That's good. We're in this book, so it's good. We're dragging along. Samuel. So the people come to Samuel and say, we want a king. How did Samuel take that? Not too good. He was mad, right? What did God say to him when he came arguing with God? He's like, I don't want to do this. Anybody remember what God said to him? Huh? Give them what they want. But just give them this warning. They're going to go through hard times. Their men are going to be put into the military. They're going to be taxed, and they're going to be living their whole lives to please this king. And what did Israel say? Yeah, that's what we want. So they have a king. And the first king's name was? Saul. That's right. And Saul started off on the right foot, like I think a lot of leaders do. But as the kingdom expanded, he started running into some difficult times. And even though traditionally and in all the other kingdoms and cultures around them, the kingdom was to pass from the king to whom? His son. But it wasn't going to work that way with Saul. Because of his transgressions and him turning his back on God, he snatched the throne from him and gave it to a man, a humble man from a small town, the youngest of a whole family of brothers, the one that was out tending the sheep, and his name was David. And that's where we're at. David started off also on the right foot. Now, in this transition time in between the two, Saul realizes that the kingdom has been taken from him, and so he tries to kill David. Not once, not twice, but many times, 3 times. And David has the opportunity to take Saul out, but he doesn't. He continuously praises the Lord. And as we ended up on 1 Samuel, there's a big battle. Saul goes out to war, like the leader should, like the king did. Went out on the front line, and he got shot by some archers. And rather than be killed by the opposing side, he fell on his own sword and he killed himself. And his three sons were killed in the same day as well. What a miserable day for Israel. And that's not to mention that David's best friend was Saul's son. So we had this crazy drama where dad wanted to kill this guy, but dad's son was best friends with him. We read even today that they were super close. They had made this covenant and this bond. And so once Saul dies and the kingdom is taken, we would assume that it would naturally go to David. But it didn't right away. There were some who still believed in the throne of Saul, and they sort of forced one of his remaining sons, Ishbosheth, onto the throne. So there became sort of the civil war. The northern kingdom, or the 10 tribes of Israel that were more on the north side, they were following Ishbosheth. But Judah had anointed for the second time David and put him into a position of power. And lo and behold, eventually it came to a place where David received enough support that Ishbosheth was taken out. I just want to let y'all know, let's turn to 2 Samuel 9 for just a moment, the type of guy that David was. So no matter how many times Saul pursued David and tried to kill him, no matter how much he had gone through, it didn't matter that his son was placed on the throne in front of him, Ishbosheth, and they had beef and all this stuff. David was such a man after God's own heart that this is what he did. I want to read briefly from the 9th chapter. It says, "And David said, is there anyone left of the house of Saul, not so we could exact vengeance, not so we could go out and hurt him. Is there anybody from the house of Saul that I can show him kindness?" Who does that? He's looking for somebody in the family line of those that were trying to kill him just to show him some love. So I can do that on Jonathan's behalf. Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. And David said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." And the king said, "Is there not still someone of the house of Saul that I can show the kindness of God to him?" And Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan, but he's crippled in his feet." And just a little bit of the backstory, we're told a couple of chapters earlier that what happened is when they were in the middle of the war and his family found out that Saul was in trouble, that the nurse picked him up when he was just 5 years old and she dropped him. And that's how he became crippled. So he wasn't born crippled, but he was dropped and became crippled. King said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "He's in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, at Lodabar." Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, at Lodabar. And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. And David said, "Mephibosheth!" And he answered, "Behold, I'm your servant." David said to him, "Don't fear. I'm going to show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. And I'll restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always." And he paid homage and said, "What is your servant that you should show such regard for a dead dog like me?" So in all humility, he recognizes what is taking place. That even though that the torch had been passed and the throne had been moved through families, and why would you do that for me? And he goes on to tell us that Mephibosheth became a regular at David's table. Not only did he give all the land back to him and all of his servants, but he just had him at the palace all the time. You know, that he would come over to his house and he would eat and he would treat him in such a way. David was off to such a good start. And from that story on through the 8th, 9th, and 10th chapters, we hear about all these wars. David was on fire, right? We already knew that he was the kid who had the action figures made after him, right? Like every kid in Israel wanted to be David. Because Saul killed his thousands, but David killed his tens of thousands. That was the #1 track back in the day. Remember on the billboards? Everybody was walking around the city singing that song, and it infuriated Saul, but he was on fire, man. Every single battle that he entered, he won. And the Bible says that the Lord prospered him. But there is a connection, there's a relationship, because before every war, David did something. He stood before God and he prayed, and he begged God for the answer. "Lord, should I go fight the Philistines? Should I go fight the Ammonites? Should I go fight the Philistines? Should I go fight the Philistines?" They fought the Philistines constantly during this time of history. Many times they fought, but he always sought God's counsel on this before he went and did anything. And it said that he prospered. And he continued to be this great king and warrior and model and rock star. David was the man, y'all. He was the man. But let's turn to chapter 11 and find a twist in the story. This is going to be the heart of tonight. It says, "In the spring of the year, when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all of Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem." Interesting. So, David's this big warrior, right? You know, he ascended to the throne. God had his hand on every single battle. He was at the front lines. He was leading the military. And it says in the springtime, that was always the most favorable time for war, because food was readily available. And of course, if you want to go kill people, you want to make sure the weather's nice. You know, you don't want to go out there and be suffering in the winter trying to kill your opponents and enemies. You want to make sure that the weather is fine. So springtime was when the battles always arose. And it was during that time that David sent Joab and his servants with him. And they went out and fought the Ammonites and besieged the city of Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. Why would he do such a thing? Why would David remain at home in the middle of battle? This is something he's never done. I mean, what would that look like when your primary leader is just sitting around doing nothing when you are at war? I mean, that would be the equivalent of us like being in the middle of a battle. This would be like America in the middle of a war, and you catch Obama playing golf. This would be like the United States in the middle of the war, and you catching Obama at the Bulls game with a beer. This would be the equivalent of us, getting bombed by China, and Obama's like, yeah, go ahead, and, y'all take care of this. Now, there could be, maybe,
You might want to make a disclosure for any Democrats, and you know what I'm saying? Like, Word Up Ministries does not condone nor agree with everything that's preaching. If you are a Democrat, we love you as well.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying, I'm using that as an illustration of how we would feel if we were in the middle of a serious war and we caught that. I know there's been all sorts of contention about Obama living his life and enjoying his life, and there's nothing wrong with him, enjoying his family and life. But I would say that if we're in the middle of the biggest crisis we ever had and you caught that, that's what's going on here. The country is at war and dude's sitting at home. Now, could there have been reasonable reasons for David to be at home? Maybe. Maybe he was nursing an injury from a past battle. He still had that pulled hamstring, from the last time he fought the Philistines. I don't know. I mean, that could be. Maybe that's why he was there. Maybe it was because there were other civil matters taking place in the country, and he needed to go tend to those things. So there could be some realistic reasons why David wasn't at war, but I don't believe that's how the text is read. I don't believe that's how. I believe that the emphasis, again, at the end of verse 1 of saying, but David remained at Jerusalem. I believe that was revealing to us that he could have, and he should have been out there like he always was. But what happened? Had he grown too complacent, comfortable, cocky? What was it that made him to sit at home during this time? I just want to challenge all of us that you always got to stay on guard. Man, when things are going good, that's not the time to pull back and coast. When things are going good, that is the time to press. When God is doing something good in your life, it's not time to sit back and look at your achievements like this is awesome. That's time to continue the fire going, because I'm telling you, you got to strike while that iron's hot, because it's not always going to be hot. You're making progress with your children. They haven't been living for the Lord for a long time, and they're catching heat. Don't just sit back and think that it's good enough, man. If they want to pray every day, 3 times a day, let them. Ask them. Don't just sit back and say like, oh, it's cute, My daughter's praying now, every now and then. Press in. But whether it's your job, your family, relationships, whatever it may be, just continue to go out and get it and don't grow comfortable. Now, it happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. So here's David, chilling. Everybody else is at war. He's just enjoying the sunset on the roof of his palace. And he looks out, and it's no coincidence. I mean, there wasn't modern plumbing during this time. So there were central places where people took baths. There may have been some really, really rich people who could have afforded a private bath. But for the most part, there were areas, specifically public baths, where people would go cleanse themselves. So David sees this woman bathing. This is the equivalent of David. Basically, I mean, he's achieving every middle school boy's dream. He's looking into the girls' locker room. You know what I mean? He is overlooking this balcony and just seeing what's going on out there. I wonder if he knew what he was looking for. I mean, he surely knew where all the pools and stuff were. And he saw the woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. He should have stopped right there, guys. You should have stopped right there. I just want to challenge all men, including myself, the moment that you find yourself attracted to somebody like that, and you're not in a position to be attracted to somebody, meaning you're married, you're in a relationship, you're not made whole in God, you are not ready to pursue anything like that. The moment you see something beautiful like that, you need to run. For real. You know, if I'm driving down the road and I see somebody, a woman jogging in bright clothes, and man, ladies, y'all got to quit wearing like, you know, the bright clothes to work out in. It's just like turning the light on, you know what I mean? Like, you just need to tone it down. Maybe wear some black or just, you know, some brown stuff to work out in, but it's always this real loud stuff. When I see that, you know, I see that green shirt jogging, man, I'm just like, I don't even want to, you know, I don't want to see your face. You know, like we got to be on guard, fellas, all the time. Whether you're married, you're in a relationship, you're not made whole. Now look, if you're, you know, made whole in Christ, and the Lord is the foundation of everything you do, and you are not married, and you are not in a relationship, and you are single and ready to mingle, then you may be able to approach a woman like that. David wasn't in a position to needing to be doing that. And so that was the first. When he saw that she was beautiful, that was the temptation. But what he did next is what led to his sin. There's a difference between being tempted and being and sinning. And God, he tells us in the 1 Corinthians 10:33, that no man can say that when he is tempted that God hasn't given him a way out. God will always give you a way out. And I was talking about this with some friends on Monday, but time and time again, God will give you a way to get out of what you're trying to do. Every single time. You know, let's just say you're on your way to the dope man. You know what I mean? You're on your way to the dope man, you're going to get, you know, a bag like you normally do, and it never fails that, oh, he don't have none. That's God, y'all, saying, okay, you don't need it. But most people will be like, oh, well, hey, does your boy got some? And then they go over there, and it's like, nah, we don't got none today. And then God's saying, like, okay, you don't need it. And then you're like, hey, wait, but what about your boy? We just sit there desperate. Same thing happens, you know. You're about to get involved in some physical situation that you know you shouldn't be, and little brother starts knocking on the door. That's not little brother, y'all. That's Jesus. Jesus is giving you a chance to cut the ties right then and there. But so often we fight through it like, hey, yeah, you can borrow Madden 15, man. Come get whatever game you want. Whatever's going to keep you away from me for the next hour or whatever. You know, when God gives us a way out. David had a way out. When he recognized her as beautiful, that's when he should have responded and been on his guard like he normally was. Verse 3, it says, David sent and inquired about the woman. Why, David? He asked about her. And someone said, isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Uh-oh. Strike two. Right? David was well taken care of, y'all. He had enough honeys. I mean, we hear all about it, man. You know, we go to 2 Samuel 5:13. It says, David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem. And he came from Hebron, and more sons and more daughters were born to David. So, I mean, he didn't have a lack. In fact, in the 3rd chapter, in the first 5 verses, says this, there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David grew stronger and stronger while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. And sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Ammon of Ahinoam of Jezreel, and his second Chileab of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel, and the third Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, and the fourth Adonijah, the son of Haggith, and the fifth Shephatiah, the son of Abital, and the sixth Ithream of Eglon, David's wife. 6 babies' mamas right there. Dude had plenty. You know, he wasn't hurting. But yet he sees this woman who is married, and he still pursues. Now, I'm not here to go into polygamy during biblical times. There were some allowances where men were allowed to take multiple wives. Fellas, that's not an option for us today. But that's for another sermon and another time. So it says that he inquired and found out that she was married, but David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now, I don't know if that was consensual. rock star, model, warrior, David. It could have been consensual. It could have been silently enforced because he was the king and you do what the king says. But either way, they laid down together. And after she had been done purifying herself from uncleanness, she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, and she sent and told him, David, I'm pregnant. Could you imagine getting that text? Man, maybe you've gotten that text. Pregnant. I just think about that, like send the message today, we wouldn't send a message. We wouldn't be telling anybody. I was like, pregnant. Oh boy. Oh boy. She's married, now she's pregnant. Oh geez, oh no, what? If she wasn't married and she sent that text, I am pregnant. Oh geez, oh boy, oh gosh, hold up. And he's already got at least 6 kids and 6 babies' mom. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab was doing and how the people were doing and how the war was going. That was nice. David really cared about how this war was going. The one where he should have been out there. He was really concerned with how things were. So he's asking his leader in the army, how's it going? And David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. And Uriah went out of the king's house and Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. Now, you got to think in those times, the shoe game wasn't quite what it is today, and there's a ton of rocks and dust out there, so your feet were always sore, your feet were always dirty, and to wash somebody's feet was like the greatest thing you could do. That was the most comforting thing in the area like the Middle East during that time. So when David was commanding Uriah, go home and wash your feet, what was he saying? Just chill, man. Just don't chill, bro. Go kick your feet up. And it says that he left there and he was followed by presents. Man, I wonder if he caught on to anything. This is weird. You're fighting this war and you're supposed to go home and chill and given all of these gifts. That's interesting. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord and did not go down to his house. When they told David, Uriah didn't go down to his house. David said to Uriah, haven't you come from a journey? Why didn't you go down to your house? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord, that means like my master, my boss, not the Lord like God, the lowercase Lord. Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I won't do this thing. Man, the conviction that must have hit him during that time. So he's trying to get him to go lay with his wife. Now, why do we suppose that David was so interested in Uriah sleeping with his wife? He was trying to set him up. There was no DNA test back then. Uriah goes home, lays with his wife. She's pregnant. Boom. Hands are clean. I'm good. I'm good. But this man was so committed to God, so committed to his country, that he didn't even go home. He said, all of my people are out there laying out in the field. My people are camping in tents. The ark of God that housed the 10 Commandments. And what they saw is that the very presence of God was in a tent. You think I'm going to go home and put my feet up? I won't do that. He even goes as far to say this, as you live and as your soul lives, I won't do this. And David said to Uriah, remain here today and tomorrow, and I'll send you back. Undoubtedly, that was probably just to try to take his toll a little bit longer, maybe entice him to go back there, just come up with a new plan. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem those next 2 days. And David invited him, and he ate in his presence and drank, so that he made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his Lord. But he didn't go down to his house. He still refused. And in the morning David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, that he can be struck down and die. We've watched David go from lust, which led into adultery, which led into manipulation, which led into lying, and now leads into this other thing where he's setting up this man for death. I just want to be we need to be reminded that sin isn't a solo rider. Sin does not like to roll alone. And sin always likes to bring with it 3 or 4 or 5 friends. In fact, they like to travel in vans and buses normally. Sin likes to bring as many of his friends as possible with him. And so it just happens this way. It starts with a little temptation, starts out with some sex. Depending on how that goes, that might lead into more sex. Then it comes into all of these other lies and all of these different things that follow along with sin. And that's why it's just like a little bit of yeast. Like yeast in the bread. Jesus always talks about, equating sin oftentimes to yeast. And if y'all have ever cooked or baked, we don't do a lot of that really in our culture. But, if you add the yeast to bread, it blows it up. And it blows it up very quickly. Sin often does that same thing, man. It starts with just that little bit. You open the door to that, and then it leads to a whole other trail of some other stuff. And that's kind of the cycle that David had found himself in. So send him out on the front line to where the worst fighting is, then recede so that he can die. And is this really David? David who killed Goliath? David who prayed before every war and begged God for his vision of what he wanted? The same David that sung songs unto the Lord and praised him and cast out demons through his worship. I mean, is this the same guy? And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting. And he instructed the messenger who was going to leave the battlefield and go inform him. He says, when you have finished telling all the news about the fighting to the king, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why did you go so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know that they would shoot you from the wall? I mean, how did Abimelech die, the son of Jerubbesheth? Didn't a woman cast an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died at the beds? Why did you go so close to the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So the king's going to get mad. How did y'all lose this battle? What were y'all doing so close to the city? Didn't you learn from Abimelech? I mean, a woman cast a millstone on him and he died. You knew not to get so close to that city wall. How did you lose this battle? Hey, Uriah's dead. Oh. Okay. Y'all take this as a lesson, okay? And you just don't go next to that wall next time, all right? You see how more manipulation came from that. As soon as the king was getting mad, just let him know, hey, you got what you wanted. I'm going to use that as a bribe, and here he is. So the messenger went and came and told David all that Joab had sent him to tell. And the messenger said to David, the men gained an advantage over us and came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead. He just got right to the chase. And your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. David said to the messenger, this you shall say to Joab, don't let this matter displease you. Say what? Don't worry about it. We lost the war. One of our best men, a soldier of soldiers who on the front line, a valiant man, he's dead. Hey, don't worry about it, man. It's all good. It's cool. No problem. For the sword devours now one and now another. This is going to happen to everybody, is what he's saying. The sword devours one day this person, another day, one day we're all going to fall to this same consequence of death. So it is what it is. This doesn't sound like David to me, y'all. This doesn't sound like David to me. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it and encourage him. When the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she lamented over her husband. And when the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done had displeased the Lord. She had just got done mourning the death of her husband. Now, biblical studies from that time frame reveal to us that the normal period of mourning for people in Israel during that time. Anyone want to take a guess how long that was? It's a good guess.
About 3 days.
A little more. A week. So the allotted time of mourning, they would have this long procession. They were saying they went through this whole funeral process and the grieving process, and it was about a week. David didn't waste no time. No time. See what sexual sin has in store for us. Not only does sin always bring with it more sin along with it, but sexual sin in particular, it takes a particular toll on our souls. 1 Corinthians, the 6th chapter, tells us this way, that all sins take place outside of a man's body, but sexual sin is an internal sin. And if you are a God-believing Christ follower and the Spirit lives in you, and you're committing sexual sin, you're engaging God into that mess. You're involving God because, you are His, right? He lives in you, and then you're taking this same shell and joining it in an illicit relationship. And that sexual temptation, that sexual sin takes a toll like none other because it's an internal sin. And so if you find yourself struggling with that, man, I pray that you get it under control. And sexual sin surfaces in many different ways. It could be, pornography. And maybe you're convincing yourself right now that, well, at least, Lord, I've quit having sex with my girl. I haven't had sex with women in a long time. It's just pornography. I know it's not quite as bad. It is. It is. Pornography begins to develop within you this sort of sexual portfolio of likes and dislikes and taste and distaste and expectations that are unrealistic. Fellas, you will see things in pornography that if you ever try on a God-fearing, modest woman, you're going to get punched. You're going to get punched in the face. And, I can be transparent. There was a time, not only when I was promiscuous and I had involved myself in pornography, and I look back at some of those images that used to drive me and some of those things that used to just be fantasies. And I think about that now, and as I'm getting close, and have a strong desire for marriage, I think about, I would never even want to do some of those things to my wife. But we allow these images on TV and movies and pornography to drive this just sick, almost violent, passionate lust, this disgusting lust, and it doesn't translate to a godly sex life. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. That's not God's intent, the things that you see on TV. And how are you going to feel one day when you go to lay with your spouse, with whom you've entered into a blood-bought covenant with Jesus Christ at the center, and you have a flashback? You have a flashback. You think about what you saw on the computer 8 years ago. How are you going to feel? How are you going to feel when you find yourself dissatisfied in your sex life, in your marriage, because you're so used to all of this unbelievable Hollywood-esque fantasies, and that's not how real married sex life works. You're lucky if you have it, really. It's not this thing that you have been subjected to. And I know I'm addressing it from a masculine perspective because I'm a man, but I would be a fool to think that there aren't ladies that are here or that we know that also suffer from the same things, that think that their idea of sexuality and romance is being informed by pornography or by movies that come out and stuff like that. It's not realistic, y'all. God wants to inform our sexuality, and if we do it the right way, with the right person, with God at the center, it'll be the best sex you've ever had. It'll be the best sex you could ever imagine. But I say this because I know that sexual sin, it takes a particular toll on you. The middle third of my life could be characterized by rebellion and running from God. And it started with alcohol, and it started with drugs, and it started with pride, and it started with arrogance, and it started with serving the God of me. But I was able to preserve my purity, my virginity for quite some time. And, I was always, didn't matter what else I was out there doing, I always convinced myself, I'm going to wait till I'm married. I'm going to wait till I'm married. I'm going to wait till I'm married. And, it was my second semester of my senior year in high school. And I broke that commitment, and I broke that promise. And something snapped when that happened. Something snapped. You know, the things that I used to think were horrible, the conviction and the guilt that accompanied that, they didn't seem that bad anymore. You know, my depravity and my sinfulness and my lust for just evil, it amplified so much when I opened that door. I was with the girl that I lost my virginity to for 2.5 years before we offended God and did that. The next girl that I dated, I was with for 2 weeks until we engaged in that same sort of gross activity. And then you could just imagine the downward spiral from there. But it bleeds into everything. It's just like something is destroyed inside of you once you let that. Can anybody relate to what I'm saying right now? Is anybody like, feel me? You know, that moment, like you might have done some other stuff, but it's that sexual sin that, fellas, it turns into violence. I mean, it turns into violence. It turns into all other types of stuff. It's just like nothing matters anymore. You know, and so let us be reminded from the story of David the type of toll that sexual sin takes on us. And I want to pray with you today, if you're struggling, you know, that you would put up the right guards that you need to put up. If you struggle and you know that you're weak and you know, you keep saying, all right, this is it, God, I'm not going to have sex until I find this godly man, until I find this godly woman, and we get married, you know, and we're going to do it right. And you've said that for the past 4 boyfriends, and you keep making the same mistake, then you're going to have to start taking an inventory about your life and saying, I got to change something about what I'm doing. I got to quit putting myself in a position to even be vulnerable to this. Maybe it's I'm not going to be alone. And that sounds like super extreme, right? Like, well, we can't watch a movie at the house. Not if every time you're lured into sex. No. You know, our love for God should be so extreme that we're willing to take extreme measures. Yeah, it's extreme to have to be out in public every time I see my girlfriend. But I serve a God who loves me extremely. And if my passion for Him and my love for Him is as extreme, then I'll be willing to cut my right hand off. And I'll be willing to gouge my right eye out. You know, Jesus uses hyperbole and says that basically, you know, if your right eye is causing you to sin, then gouge it out. If your right hand is causing you to sin, then cut it off. Better for you to make it to heaven with one eye and one arm than for you to go to hell and have both your eyes and both of your arms. So if it causes a little bit of pain, to say, yeah, I'm sorry, I got to be honest with you, I just don't want you coming over, not because I don't want to hang out with you, but I'm weak. You're beautiful. And I just know when we get on this couch, I'm just going to be hard, you know, to keep my hands off you. I'm just being honest, you know. And that's okay. You can be a Christian and say that. Did you know that? You can be a Christian and look at your girl and say, look, you're beautiful, and I don't want to get you alone because I'm handsy. You know, I'm handsy. And I don't want to be handsy, so I'm just going to ask that you don't come over. You can still be a Christian and say that. You can admit, and you can start developing a plan to preserve that. You know what I mean? Whatever extreme things that you need to do, I just adjure you that you do it. You do it because sexual sin, it's alive and well. It's so wide open in our culture. You can't check out a commercial. I mean, it's everywhere. And, you know, it just starts with a little commercial, fellas, and then, you know, the next thing you see a YouTube video, and then you see the other little YouTube videos on the side, and now you're clicking on them, and then you're on Facebook, and they're telling you girls that you may know. And how come the people that I may know are never dudes? How come the people that I may know are never fully dressed women? I mean, the people that I may know, and how do they, it makes no sense, because they're real people. I mean, we got 17 mutual friends, but I mean, it's always the chick that's got like the summer picture in her bikini out. Like, it's never just like a homeboy. Oh, remember Jimmy from middle school? It's always Elena. You know, the ugly duckling story. Like, you know, Elena went so hot in middle school, but now she's just like, you know. Is it just me, fellas? No. Because everyone that they advertise that I might know is showing a cleavage pic. And I'm is it true? Yeah. Ladies, do they show the same cleavage, ladies, for y'all, or is it like dudes with their shirt off in the gym and stuff?
Yeah.
I'm asking a serious question. Who do they advertise that y'all might know? Is it women or men? Both. I have not one. I'll pull it up right now. I have not one man on my people you may know. If I do have a man, it's because he's in the picture with the woman with the cleavage. Motorboat or something, man. And the type of pictures I see, I'm just being honest. Just being honest. And so fellas, being the more visual gender, we have to fight extra hard to not click on that Facebook. You know where that leads. You know where it led you last time. It started with Facebook, and you were cool for a week. And it started with YouTube, and you were cool for a couple days. But then you broke down. You went ahead and went on that porn site that you're so used to. And you're convicted. And you do it for a couple more times. And no, I'm not going to do it again. Then you lie about it. And then it accompanies more sin, because remember, sin doesn't like to ride solo. Sin likes to bring a whole van of people with it. Know this, that right now you may be in the lead in your sin. Nobody knows that you're having sex with your girlfriend. No one knows that you're having sex with your boyfriend.
But you're right.
Nobody knows that you're looking at pornography. Yet. Sin, you may have the lead over your sin right now, but I promise you, it is going to come to surface. And nobody knows I'm just, I used to be an alcoholic. I'm drinking just a little bit, just on the weekends. You don't catch a DUI. I promise you. Might be 6 months, might be a year, might be 2 years, but sin is not going to go away that easy. You think that you're ahead right now and that you haven't been busted. Sorry, y'all. Was that violence? But your sin's going to catch up to you. I don't care what it is. If you're lying, your card's going to get pulled. You're going to tell a story, and somebody who knows you well enough is going to be like, that ain't true. There ain't nothing like that at all. It's going to come out, right? Sooner or later, it's going to come out. Man, I really quit all drugs, but I'm just, we had a couple Xanax left in the cabinet, and it's going to come out. I promise you. You think you have the lead. You may come up with all these great plans like David did, but whatever it is you are doing will not stay hidden for long. I promise you. And last but not least, sin always has painful consequences. Even if you're not busted right now, maybe you're in the lead and you're like, man, nobody, I'm not doing anything. I'm using this pornography as a vice that, it's actually helping me right now to not have sex. No, it's not. That lust is just as strong as if you were having sex with somebody. I'm smoking, I'm not, popping pills, and it's not helping. You don't wean off of sin. You murder sin. You kill sin. Right now, today, in the presence of God, you end it. It's not some plan, like some restoration plan of, all right, well, I'm going to cut back from 5 joints a day, and then next week I'm going to do 3, and then, no, just quit smoking. You know what I mean? It's not like, well, I'm going to talk to my girl and we're going to slowly stop having sex. No, if you're having sex in your relationship, you need to break up. Right now. Right now. That's what's going to please God. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily forever, but the only way that you're going to be restored is, number one, to restore this. It's impossible. I long for the day that somebody proves me wrong, but it is impossible to fix this and this at the same time. To try to embark on the 2 most significant relationships in your life at the same time is suicide. There's no way that that's going to work, because they are both so important. Number one, this being the vertical relationship with you and God is the most important thing that you could ever work on. And if you think that you're not right with Him, but you're going to find the love of your life in the middle of that, when God's still shaping you and molding you, you're crazy. Next to choosing Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, picking a mate is the most important thing that you could ever do. And if you're dating somebody, you're saying that I'm looking for marriage. If you're just looking for friends to hang out with and watch movies with, there's a ton of people in here that you can hang out with. But if you're dating somebody, you're saying, I want to see if this has legs. Could we serve God together for the rest of our lives? And if you're not serving God with all of your life yet, then there's no point in even trying to look for this yet. There really isn't. Just know that there are consequences. With David, if you continue to read the story, it comes out. It comes out exactly what had happened. As far as fooled by a prophet, it is made known exactly what he did. And the baby that Bathsheba was pregnant with dies. The baby dies. David loses some of his leadership point, and it kind of starts a downward spiral. People start looking at him different. David was untouchable up to this point. And for those that aspire to any position of leadership, whether that's as a mother or father, whether that's as a boss, especially if that's a pastor, you don't get unlimited chances for these things. Some people will extend the grace that God does, but people don't normally extend grace like God does. People are going to change the way they look at you. They're going to change the way that they view your influence on them. And we don't want to do that, because every bit of influence, every platform that we get is an opportunity to glorify God. There's going to be consequences of various degrees. So just know that tonight, that whatever sin it is that you're struggling with, and it's not necessarily David's sin. Maybe it's not lust. Maybe it's not sex. Maybe it's not drinking. Maybe it's not smoking. I know when we first, a lot of us who share a similar background as me, we first started this faith journey, and you think that's really what it's all about, right? These big things in our life that are very obvious to everybody. And then you get down in it, and you really get into this thing. You maybe serve God 5-10 years. I mean, there's things God reveals about me every single day. Maybe it's not lust. Maybe it's complacency. Maybe you think you know enough. Maybe you think you're good in your relationship with God. Maybe you're not pressing in and doing the things that He wants. Maybe it's pride. Maybe you're constantly defensive when somebody wants to address maybe an area of your life that God wants to continue to shape and mold. Maybe it's anger. Maybe the person that drives in front of you on the road, you're ready to snap. You're honking the horn, you're riding their bumper. Maybe it's judgment. And maybe it's judgment against other people. You may be here today just coming to Christ, and you think that the people that have been in church for a long time are judging you, and not realizing that really you're judging them by assuming that. I did that. I first got saved, and I'm like, man, these people ain't going to accept me. I still smell like smoke. I'm leaving church tonight, I'm going to get high. These people ain't going to accept me. They were ready to love me. They were ready to love me. I was the judgmental one. They didn't say anything to me. They knew I was high, sitting in the balcony of a church where there was only attendance up to the first 3 rows on the bottom floor. I'm going to the balcony, sitting in the back row. What's wrong with you, bro? By the way, I can still see your eyes are red from here. But come here, let me love you. Maybe you're casting judgment on other people, thinking that they're going to judge you. Whatever it may be. I just pray that tonight that we would understand all of these things, that we would understand that sin never rides solo. Sexual sin takes a particular toll on your soul. And that sin is always going to have consequences. And though you may be in the lead right now, it's going to be uncovered. So we can uncover it tonight. It's going to come to the surface anyways. It's going to come to the surface anyways. So if you're here tonight and you're struggling in sin, you're steeped in sin, you're practicing sin, and you want to stop it, and you want to say, you're right, I'm in the lead right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and give everything to God right now. Pull my card. I'm lost in sin. I'm not living right. I know God has something better in store for me, and I want it to change right now. I just want to give you the opportunity to stand up and just say, I'm lost in sin. I'm not talking to somebody who sins. That's all of us. I'm saying right now, if you're lost in sin, and you're so far from God, and you're ready to just go ahead and just say, I'm ready. I'm ready to submit all this to Jesus. I just want to give you the opportunity to be courageous, because we're just here ready to hug you. Anybody here ready to judge you? You've all either been where you're at, or we're still where you're at. That's the only 2 choices. We've either been where you're at, or we're still there. So if you want to make that bold proclamation tonight and give your all to Jesus Christ, so I encourage you to stand up right now so we can pray for you.